Last day of Romford Film Festival. I'm here with Duncan Paveling, who is the writer-director of Little Mary. Thank you so much for joining us, Duncan.
Thank you for having us.
It's a very, very powerful film. Very, very good film. So congratulations, first of all.
Thank you.
Where did the inspiration for the story come about?
So it's a kind of a combination of things. It was my first sort of attempt at directing, so it was an opportunity to do something that was personal and also sort of drew in elements of a feature script that I have. So all the elements of the marionettes and stuff is a feature script that I've written, which has got that as part of it. So it's kind of an opportunity to kind of look into that. But the main part of the story came from personal experience. About 3 years ago, I lost both my parents within a short space of time, so within 3 months of each other. So it was very much an opportunity to kind of write a little kind of story about how I saw their love for each other when they were going through a difficult time, because I lost my mum to cancer, right, and then my dad a few months later, quite suddenly. So what I saw in their time was just sort of normal life, really. So it was kind of an opportunity to kind of quite cathartic as well, I suppose. And we shot it actually what was their family home, or their home.
Okay, well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I can tell that it's obviously a very powerful piece for you. Something you obviously had to get out. Is that how you kind of approached it? Is it something you had to do?
It was elements of that very much. I mean, I think anything that I've written before and currently is always, there's an element of sort of personal experience in it. So that didn't change with that, really. It was sort of very much driven by emotion, really, more than anything, and I wanted it to be an emotive piece, and actually kind of use the space and the silences in between what people say and do, more than anything, and how we then kind of deal with our grief. Generally I put that into something creative, and that's kind of the themes of the story as well, putting, obviously, with her creation of a marionette, obviously in his image, again, is kind of how people use things creatively, and then obviously things allow themselves to live on in some way.
Did the marionettes come from real life as well, or are they like an invention?
That's that's something. There's a piece I've written, which is a small element of it in a feature script I've written, and I've always, been quite interested in marionettes. I'm not quite sure where that came from, if I'm honest. I suppose we grew up in an age of watching kind of puppets and marionettes and stuff on, in cinema and TV, and always got a love for stop motion animation, things like that. So there's something really quite fascinating about the movement and the creativity that goes into those sort of things. So that was kind of a visual reference to start with, and then it's kind of merged into something else, really.
Yeah, I mean, part of being a director is kind of controlling puppets all the way, so I kind of see a link there, maybe a subconscious one.
To be fair, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I suppose there is an element of that, sort of creating something, and obviously kind of, hopefully kind of guiding. I think it more of guiding people. I was really fortunate because obviously being the first thing I directed, having Susanna and Stephen, I was really fortunate because they're both fantastic and very experienced actors. So we were very, very fortunate to have them. Susanna I've worked with before, and the part was very much written for her. Right. Stephen, as people will know, sort of making shorts, you sometimes don't always get a lot of time with people. Sure. And he came on board a week before. Right. So he was brilliant. He sort of was very very open and very engaging, and he was terrific. So, and they're so professional that they knew exactly, they in terms of, I didn't have to think too much about anything but feeling. Right. So we just felt our way through it on the days of the shoot, as opposed to having to think too much, or it wasn't too. It was actually really easy to work with them. They made it very easy to work with. So
yeah, and this piece really does live or die on the fact that they are so good together. And it really surprised me there when you said that they only really had a week together beforehand. Did they kind of get to do any workshopping at all?
No, this is where they're so brilliant, and that's a sign of like we had a really good casting director, Ben, who managed to. I mean, he. Immediately when he read it, he spoke about Stephen. Most people probably know him best from The Crown. He played Dennis Thatcher in The Crown,
yes.
And he sort of mentioned his name straight away. And as I say, Susanna, I had a relationship with anyway, so knew what I was getting with her. And anyone who's seen her previous kind of work knows exactly what she's capable of. But she'd sort of taken she's sort of coming back into her own again. She took a break from acting for a period of time after sort of a huge early success in her career. And so when we put them together, I mean, ironically, they met the night before we shot. Wow. So we shot all of Susanna's stuff in the workshop in London, and then we all went to Norfolk for 2 days, and Stephen met us on the Friday night, and that's the first time they met. And I'd had a couple of conversations with him in the build-up, but again, didn't really talk very much about the script. We just talked about life and feeling and family and experiences, and that's what the piece was very much based on. Was we didn't have to talk a lot about the piece in itself, which is quite strange, but I quite liked that as well.
Yeah. Did you mention how many days the shoot was?
3. We had 3 days. We shot in a small workshop in. There's very few marionette makers in the UK, and we came across 2 who sort of were close enough to us, both in London. One. We had a look at both, and then one sort of seemed to just sort of fit. It was a tiny place, so in the back of someone's garden. And it's the Puppet Barge Theatre, which they're open sort of predominantly kind of through the summer, and it's just an incredible place to go and visit. Really fortunate they let us use, because it's at the back of their house. And we had a very reduced crew for that as well, only 10 people for that day, and that was on the Friday. So then we went up to Norfolk, and there was about 20 crew for us on the Saturday, Sunday of the rest of it, which is where we shot at the house.
Okay. So this is the first film you've directed, you said. Have you got a past in film at all? Yeah, so I've kind of worked on and off in film and TV for a long time. Alongside that, I've always worked in kind of sort of well-being and such. I'm actually a qualified and practicing therapist as well. Okay. But I began working in film for Barrington Phelan, the film composer, TV composer, best known for Inspector Morse. Oh, right. So I worked with him. It was the first job I ever did. And then I worked sort of TV documentaries and stuff on projects for BBC and stuff like that. I worked for a film director for a while. And then a few years ago, I wrote a film called My Feral Heart, which was directed by Jane Gull, and that was a feature film which we made independently, and that was we were fortunate. It's really well received. It was nominated for, I think, won about 14 awards sort of worldwide, and was nominated for 3 BIFAs. Had a really good sort of, really well received. It was well loved, so we were very fortunate in that respect. How's this film, Bill Mary, done so far? I mean, we've had a few sort of special screens. I mean, the first screen we had was sort of last year. Was LA Shorts in America, which was a sort of a Academy qualifying festival, which that was good. We've got a few more possibly coming up as well. So it's just you never know where it's going to be and how it's going to turn out. I mean, ultimately,
I think all involved, we're really proud of the little film that we made. It's what I wanted it to be. It's how it turned out how I wanted it to be. The hope is it finds its home, in different places. But we'd like to get a few. We've got, we're hoping for a few more festivals this year as well. But it's just nice for people to get to see it. That's what you make stuff for.
Yeah, definitely. So you say that you're very proud, and you should be. What was the proudest kind of moment? Was there a moment when you were like, that shot, or whatever it might be, that you thought, yes, that's the one?
It's a good question. I think on a personal thing, I think partly because it's something that was discussed very early on, was when Susanna first read the script. There's a scene where she breaks down in the kitchen, and it's quite a key kind of moment, because I always knew that it would be kind of a long sequence, and obviously that had to be kind of right for the piece to work, because it's quite an emotional scene. And I remember Susanna and I talking about early stages, and she was talking about getting that right, and it just felt like the only sticking point that we had. Like it was like creating and I think in the end we just decided not to talk about it. Right. and I said we'll just deal with it on the day, because I just knew she'd get it right. And there was a few little things that I kind of did just to kind of beforehand, gave a couple of things to read, and just we didn't really talk about it. And we did 2 shots, and we did it in 2 takes. So we did the wide, which is there once, and then we did the close up once. So we did 2 takes of that, and that was it. I was happy with it, and I think there was a sense. There wasn't necessarily a sense of relief, but there was certainly a sense of accomplishment once we got that one done. And I just said, I remember saying to her, I said, I'm happy. Are you happy? Do you want to do it again? And she goes, no, I'm happy. I was like, that's fine. Let's move on. And we just went to the close up, and that was that. So that was probably a moment that felt really good. I think there was a sense of relief when we got to Norfolk as well, because we'd done this day in London, which was really full, all the creative stuff, and we shot a lot and we had to get out of London, try and get out of London before the rush hour. And it just felt like we were really sort of pressed for time and space and everything. So I think once we got out to the country, it felt like we could breathe a bit, and we knew we had time, we had control over the space. There was going to be no noise, or a bit more relaxed, I think.
Was there any audience questions at this particular point? Raise your hand, we'll get a mic out to you.
What did you prefer to direct, humans or marionettes?
That's a really good question. I mean, humans are great, marionettes are great, but I didn't. To be fair, we had obviously, I'm going to give away. Susanna isn't a professional marionette maker or puppeteer. So there was actually Stan, who was kind of let us use the workshop. He did a lot of the work, the puppet work, and it was actually quite simple. That was actually quite easy to do. But then again, directing the actors was really simple. They were really engaging, really lovely people. I loved working with actors, and I think because it was a 2-hander as well, it was really important that worked, because obviously the relationship between them had to be believable, that these two had been married for decades, even though they'd only just met. So, but yeah, it was in answer to the question, marionettes are probably more complicated because you can get the strings tangled and stuff, and I have no idea what to do.
We've got time for one more question. Otherwise, I will ask it. Yeah. Okay, what are you working on next, Duncan?
Got a number of things kind of ongoing and in development. So there's a few feature films in development.
Okay.
Got a couple of short films which we looked at, because obviously primarily kind of been writing, but obviously want to direct more. That's kind of like the ultimate goal. So a couple of more shorts I'd like to shoot this, sort of hopefully this year. And and then look to direct a feature hopefully next year or whenever, and we're working on a couple of documentaries as well.
Okay.
And they're quite interesting projects. Difficult to talk too much about those,
Sure.
but a couple of documentaries, both. One of them actually. Actually, both of them are quite creative and very, very interesting subject matters. They're particularly one. I don't think we've really sort of seen sort of that sort of thing put to screen before, like in documentaries. So it'd be quite interesting to see how that turns out.
Okay, what a teaser! Whatever it is, I can't wait to see it. Thanks so much for coming, Duncan.
Thanks for having us.
Congratulations on the film.
Thank you.
Give a round of applause, please, for Duncan.
Thank you.